They called her the Counter. Not as praise, but as a joke. Just the girl who counts bullets, while real soldiers do the dying. Leah Brooks never fired a shot in combat, never saw the enemy except on spreadsheets and supply crates, until the helicopter went down in hostile territory, until the team's sniper took a round to the chest, until someone had to pick up that rifle, or watch everyone die. Her hands are shaking, the enemy sniper is hunting her, and she has one bullet to prove she's more than the girl who counts. This is how a logistics specialist became the soldier who saved an elite unit, and how one shot changed her life forever. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe honor still matters, tap the screen to keep their legacy alive. The bullet hit the rock less than an inch from her face. Stone fragments sliced her cheek, and warm blood traced down her jawline. Leah Brooks pressed the long rifle tight against her shoulder, fighting the tremor in her hands. The world beyond the scope pulsed with gunfire and dust. 3 days ago, she was sorting ammunition crates in a quiet depot. Now she was the only person standing between her team and a complete wipeout. She took one slow breath, held it, then the world froze around her. This is where everything changed. But the story doesn't start here. It starts far from the desert. Leah grew up in a steel town that smelled of machine oil and cold winters. Her father lost his job after a factory accident, and bills began stacking higher than groceries. She needed a paycheck. Fast. The military looked like a doorway, maybe not to glory, but to stability. At 19, she raised her right hand and swore in. They assigned her to logistics, a quiet job, the kind where your hands get dusty from spreadsheets instead of battle. She counted rounds, marked inventory, and moved crates from sunup to sundown. Nothing heroic, nothing dangerous, but every evening, when her shift ended and the base lights dimmed, she walked to the far range. There, under the buzzing floodlamps, waited Staff Sergeant Hale, a weathered instructor with calm eyes and a ruined shoulder. He taught her how to breathe before a shot, how to settle her heartbeat, how to let her body rest into the rifle until it felt like part of her. Her grouping tightened fast, faster than Hale expected. "You've got something rare," he said once, brushing dust off a target. She shrugged it off. People in logistics weren't meant for anything dramatic. Weeks passed, then months. Her skills improved, but she never imagined she'd use them outside the range. Not until the night they briefed Operation Iron Dagger. The mission map filled the screen with a wash of red lines and blocked-out zones. A high-value hostile figure had been located inside a compound less than 40 meters from friendly territory. A strike team from Raven Unit would insert under darkness, neutralize resistance, and extract before dawn. The job was clean on paper. Too clean. Lieutenant Cole Mercer, compact and sharp as a blade edge, delivered the plan with crisp confidence. Beside him stood Corporal Barrett Carter, the team's primary sniper, cleaning the lens of his long rifle. Cortez, the medic, double-checked supplies. Jackson, the comms specialist, ran diagnostics on a portable array of antenna plates. Every member of the squad had a purpose. Leah had one too. Carry ammunition, carry water, carry anything that kept the fighters alive. "Brooks," Mercer said, handing her the loadout sheet. "You stay behind the main line. Support only." She nodded. It was familiar, safe, predictable. But something in her chest tightened. A faint instinct. A quiet warning she couldn't name. The team boarded the helicopter just past midnight. The desert wind rushed in through the open bay, carrying sand that felt like needles against exposed skin. Inside, everything was red lighting, metal scent, and the sharp smell of gun oil. Mercer strapped in without a word. Carter checked his rifle one last time, sliding the bolt with a practiced, confident motion. Jackson tapped his headset, confirming signal strength. Cortez secured the medical pack and glanced at Leah with a tired smile. Leah held her gear close. Extra magazines, water, emergency bandages, everything labeled, sorted, counted. Even here, in the thrum of rotor blades, she felt like the logistics specialist she had always been. The helicopter lifted off with a deep, pounding vibration. The earth fell away, swallowed by darkness. Below them, the desert stretched like an endless sea of shadows. Ahead was the compound. Behind was the last place she remembered feeling safe. For several minutes, the flight was steady. The pilot kept low, weaving between dunes and shallow ridges. No radio chatter, only the dull, rhythmic thumping of blades. Everyone knew their roles. Everyone trusted the intel. Leah tried to steady her thoughts, but something felt wrong. The night was too still, too clean. Hale once told her that instincts mattered, that silence before a storm always had a taste. She felt it now. A metallic tension in the air, a quiet countdown she couldn't explain. Then, the first tracer streaked past the tail, a burning red line that tore open the sky. The pilot shouted, jerking the helicopter sideways. Another tracer shot up, then another. The cabin lights flickered. Leah gripped the seat. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't in the plan. The route wasn't clear. The night had turned against them, and the storm had just begun. The helicopter bucked hard as more tracers climbed from the dunes. Red lines sliced past the windows, each one close enough to feel in her teeth. The pilot shouted something Leah couldn't hear over the engine's roar. A violent jolt kicked the aircraft sideways. Metal scraped against metal. Warning lights burst into flashing red across the cabin. Mercer slammed a hand against the wall, steadying himself. "Brace!" he yelled, voice sharp and direct. Leah gripped the harness until her knuckles went white. The tail dipped, the floor tilted. Then the sky spun. One more impact threw everyone off balance. A loud crack echoed through the fuselage, followed by a hiss of leaking fluid. The co-pilot slumped sideways, blood streaking his helmet. The ground rushed toward them in a blur. The pilot fought the controls, leveling the nose at the last possible second. Then came the hit, sand exploding as the helicopter slammed down. The aircraft skidded across the desert floor, sparked, shuddered, and finally stopped. Silence lasted half a second. Then gunfire erupted again. Leah's ears rang as she unlatched her harness. Smoke filled the cabin, thick and metallic. Someone coughed, someone swore, someone tried to drag the co-pilot to the exit. Mercer pushed past her. "Move! Out! Out! Out!" Leah followed, stumbling into the cold night air. Bullets snapped through the darkness. Each snap came with a puff of sand near their boots. The enemy wasn't probing, they were pushing hard. Cortez and Jackson pulled the pilot out, his breathing ragged but steady. Leah helped lift him onto a makeshift stretcher made from torn webbing. The weight dug into her shoulders. Radios fried, Jackson growled, tossing a shattered unit aside. "Every channel is dead." Mercer scanned the terrain, jaw tight. There. High ground. About 400 yards north, a jagged cluster of rocks rose from the sand. "We fall back," he ordered. "Now." The team moved in staggered bursts. 2 men fired while 2 advanced. Another pair carried the pilot on their shoulders. Leah stayed in the center, hauling her supply pack and grabbing dropped magazines along the way. Her heart hammered as she crawled and sprinted between cover. The pack felt twice as heavy now. Gunfire followed them in a relentless rhythm. Every time she thought it paused, a new burst cracked over her head. One round smacked into Rodriguez's vest, spinning him down. He lay still for a heartbeat. Then he sat up, breathless but alive. "Armor works," he joked through gritted teeth. They reached the rocks, just as the eastern horizon thinned with early light. Shadows stretched long, giving the enemy more places to hide. But the terrain gave the Raven unit something they desperately needed: cover. "Positions," Mercer shouted. The squad spread across the stone ridges, building a defensive line. Carter climbed to the highest point, setting his rifle on a flat slab. Leah dropped her pack behind a thick outcrop. She opened it and began sorting ammunition with mechanical precision. Her hands moved faster than her thoughts. She crawled to Rodriguez first. "Mag?" He nodded, firing 2 rounds before swapping with the fresh one she offered. Then she moved to Cortez. Blood sprayed across his vest as he worked on the co-pilot's wound. She handed him gauze and tourniquets without needing to ask which was which. Enemy fighters emerged across the dunes in shifting clusters. They carried rifles, machine guns, and confidence. They thought the crash made the Americans weak. Carter's rifle cracked, one sharp thunderclap at a time. Each shot dropped a target in the distance. For a moment, His precision stopped the assault cold. Leah kept crawling from rock to rock, delivering magazines and collecting empties. Sand blasted her face as bullets whizzed overhead. Her lungs burned from dust. Marcus ducked behind a boulder with her for half a second. "You okay?" She nodded, even though she couldn't feel her own legs. The enemy regrouped fast. They fanned out, slipping between dunes in coordinated patterns. They were adapting and closing. Carter shifted position to cover the left flank. As he leaned forward, a single shot cracked through the chaos. His body jerked violently. The rifle slid from his hands. Carter collapsed onto the stone, blood spreading beneath him. A chilling silence fell over the ridge. "Sniper!" Jackson shouted. Another round chipped rock near Mercer's foot. Marcus sprinted to Carter, dropping beside him. "Hez alive but out," he said, voice tight. "He can't shoot." The loss hit harder than the crash. Without a sniper, the enemy could push with numbers. They had minutes, maybe less. Mercer looked around, scanning faces. No one else was trained for that rifle. No one, except Leah, saw the long weapon lying across the stone. Its dark barrel pointed toward the rising sun. A thin trail of dust blew across the scope. Her pulse slowed. Every lesson Hale taught her returned in perfect clarity. In this moment of collapsing order, she felt something absolute. If no one picked up that rifle, they would all die. She stepped toward it. One breath. One choice. No turning back. Leah reached the fallen rifle and hesitated only long enough to steady her breath. The weapon was heavier than she expected, cold from the night air and warm where Carter's hands had held it minutes before. She wiped the dust from the grip and positioned herself behind the highest slab of rock. Mercer saw her movement. His eyebrows twitched, surprise mixed with desperate hope. "You sure?" he asked, voice taut. "No time," she said quietly. Her hands settled on the rifle, as if they had always belonged there. She set her cheek to the stock and opened the scope. Through the glass, the desert zoomed into frightening clarity. Shapes became outlines. Outlines became targets. An enemy fighter crouched behind a broken sand berm, preparing to mount a machine gun. He was about 600 yards out, too far for most rifles, but not for this one. Leah centered the crosshairs on his chest. She inhaled, held half the air, squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked hard into her shoulder. The sound snapped through the ridge like a crack of lightning. In the scope, the fighter dropped instantly, the machine gun clattering beside him. For a heartbeat, everything felt silent, even the wind held still. Then Mercer's voice hit the radio. "Raven, sniper is back online." Leah chambered another round, her hands moving by instinct alone. Another fighter darted behind a dune, thinking he had time to reposition. She tracked him, leading slightly ahead of his run, and fired again. He fell mid-stride. The line wavered. The enemy momentum broke for a moment. Marcus looked up from Carter's side. "Keep them off us!" he shouted, pressing more gauze into a spreading wound. Leah nodded without taking her eye off the scope. She shifted position, adjusting height and angle. Now that the sun had begun to rise, shadows sharpened across the terrain. Targets popped in and out like flickers of heat. A pair of fighters tried to circle the ridge from the east. Leah caught the first one as he rose to fire. The second froze, realizing too late he was visible. She fired. He collapsed in the sand. The eastern flank held, but the rifle's weight was beginning to wear on her muscles. Her arms trembled, sweat ran into her eyes, stinging and hot. She blinked, lifting a wrist to wipe the moisture. Sand stuck to her skin. The scope hardened into a narrow, unforgiving tunnel. A sudden metallic click snapped her focus downward. The rifle refused to chamber the next round. It had jammed. Leah's pulse spiked, but her training took over. She pulled the bolt back, tilted the weapon, and freed the stuck casing. A quick tap, a slide just like Hale had drilled into her dozens of nights on the range. The next round seated cleanly, she returned to the scope. But a new danger was brewing. A sharp flash glimmered from a distant ridge. Not random, not stray sunlight. A reflection like the glint of a scope. The bullet arrived a split second later. It smashed into the rock beside her head, spraying stone fragments across her cheek. A hot sting burned along the cut already there. She ducked, breathing fast, heart pounding. Marcus yelled from below. "You're taking sniper fire!" Mercer swore under his breath. "Enemy marksman, long range." Leah scanned the ridge again. A dune curved into a slope nearly 1,000 yards out. Just above it, the faintest shape shifted precise, controlled, disciplined. This wasn't a random fighter. This was a trained shooter. Someone hunting her. The duel was silent, except for the wind. Leah flattened herself behind the rock and angled the rifle just enough to catch a sliver of the ridge. She waited for the slightest movement. Another glint. Another nearly invisible shift in the sand. He was adjusting for a second shot. She had seconds, maybe less. Leah slowed her breath, forcing calm through panic. She let her racing pulse settle into a controlled rhythm, something Hale always said marked the difference between a shot and a miss. Her hands steadied. She angled the crosshairs just above the ridgeline, compensated for wind, barely a breeze, compensated again for drop at that impossible distance. Her world shrank into one line, one target, one choice. She squeezed. The rifle thundered, the scope jolted, then settled. Far away, across the dunes, a small silhouette toppled sideways. A cloud of sand puffed upward. The glint vanished. Enemy sniper down. Leah exhaled, long and shaking. The battlefield widened again around her, the sounds rushing back, gunfire, shouting, the rattle of stone under boots. But something fundamental had shifted. With the enemy marksman gone, the pressure eased. The advance slowed, and the team's chances of surviving rose. Jackson hit the radio. "Ridge is clear. Sniper threat neutralized." Leah didn't answer. She was already searching for the next target. Because the fight wasn't over, and she wasn't stopping. The distant thump of rotor blades grew louder across the horizon. At first, Leah thought it was her heartbeat still hammering in her ears. Then the sky split, with the roar of 2 Apache gunships racing toward the ridge. Their floodlights swept the desert like search beams. A moment later, the chain guns opened up with brutal precision. Lines of fire stitched across the sand, tearing through enemy formations that had been pushing forward seconds earlier. Mercer raised a hand, signaling the team to hold position. The gunships circled in tight arcs, clearing the last pockets of resistance. Explosions rolled across the dunes, shaking Leah's perch of rock. When the final burst faded, the battlefield fell into a heavy, surreal quiet. Dust drifted in slow spirals. Fighters who had charged so confidently were now scattered across the desert floor. Leah lowered her rifle, her arms trembling from exhaustion. Her shoulder throbbed where the recoil had punished her again and again. The makeshift cut on her cheek stung with every breath. Jackson climbed the ridge toward her, limping but grinning. "You saved our skins," he said, breath ragged. She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. Cortez and Rodriguez signaled from below, carrying the wounded pilot toward the landing zone. Mercer gave quick, clipped orders, tightening the perimeter. Even with the gunships overhead, no one took chances. A rescue helicopter dropped into the clearing, kicking up clouds of sand. The doors slid open, and medics rushed out with stretchers. Carter was lifted first, pale, barely conscious, but alive. Leah watched silently as they secured him. She felt the ache of the moment settle into her bones. It wasn't victory. It was survival. Mercer approached her as the team boarded the extraction bird. "You held that ridge," he said, voice low. "That wasn't luck." She opened her mouth to respond, but the words collapsed before forming. The weight of the rifle still pressed into her hands. Everything felt unreal. The helicopter lifted off, leaving the ravaged desert shrinking below them. From the air, the battlefield looked cold and distant, nothing like the chaos she had lived inside minutes before. Leah let her head fall back against the seat, eyes barely open. Back at the forward base, everything moved too fast. Debriefs, statements, medical checks. A doctor cleaned the cut on her cheek, telling her she was lucky the fragments hadn't hit her eye. She barely heard him. Her mind replayed each shot, each face behind the scope. That night, she slept only in fragments. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the rifle recoil again. Every dream dissolved into dust, smoke, and silhouettes. The next morning, Mercer called her to the command office. The room was small, lined with maps. Commander Alden, stern and focused, waited behind the desk. He read from a printed report without expression. Actions under fire, critical decision-making, exceptional marksmanship. Then he looked up, eyes settling on her. "You're being recommended for the Iron Star with Valor," he said. Leah blinked slowly, unsure how to react. The medal didn't feel real. Alden continued, "There's more. We'd like you to consider advanced marksmanship training. You've demonstrated capability far beyond your role." Mercer nodded from beside him, arms crossed. "It's your choice," he added, "but don't let this moment pass." Leah left the office with the medal in a small box. She didn't open it. She slipped it into her footlocker and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Hale found her that evening outside the barracks. He stood quietly for a moment, then said, "You handled yourself out there." She looked at him, searching for something familiar. "I didn't feel ready," she murmured. "People never do," Hale replied, "but you acted. And that's what matters." Over the next week, she walked the perimeter trails at dusk, thinking about everything that had happened. Not the gunfire, not the explosions, but the calm that came when she sighted the rifle, as if the world narrowed to one clear purpose. Finally, she signed the transfer papers. Alden approved them within hours. Soon after, a transport plane carried her to Camp Kilpatrick, home of the Army's Advanced Sniper Course. The training was relentless. Early mornings, long stalks through dense brush, firing drills under heat, cold, and exhaustion. She pushed through each challenge, quiet and focused. Every shot felt like an answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask for years. She finished the course among the top of her class, one of 15 to graduate from 31. At the ceremony, she accepted her certificate with steady hands. She no longer doubted who she was or what she was capable of. 2 weeks later, a new briefing folder slid across her desk. Mercer's name was on the top page. The mission looked severe, the kind that went straight to classified archives. A voice crackled through her radio. "Brooks, gear up. Your green light for Operation Black Fable." She locked her rifle into place, closed the case, and stepped into her next shadow. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear another story that's just as powerful and captivating, with courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about duty and justice.